Hey there everyone, I'm meteorologist Jennifer Lambers. Thanks for joining me here on Facebook Live. I'm going to go ahead and let a couple of people join. Just let me know in the comments. I do monitor them. Let me know you can hear me okay. Let me know that you can see everything. Right now we are not on Fox 2 News at 4 p.m. We are running into technical difficulties at this time, so we are showing our Storm Ready program. Great thing to keep in mind during this time, great thing to watch. But just while we get those technical difficulties figured out, I'm going to go ahead and update you on this latest advisory from the National Hurricane Center. So in case you are looking behind me, Hurricane Ida strengthening 80 miles per hour now with that track. That millibar pressure, 985 millibars, and still moving northwest at 15 miles per hour. So starting to move over Cuba still at this time. I'm going to go ahead and take this full again. I am monitoring comments, and so sorry that we are currently not on Fox 2 News at 4. Again, we are experiencing technical difficulties, so thank you again for joining us here on Facebook Live. Let's go ahead and dive right in and see what we are looking at. This right here is Ida, 80 miles per hour. Again, that 4 p.m. advisory just now coming out. Biggest change to this track. This is going to be the biggest change with that 4 p.m. advisory. Now expected to become a Category 4 hurricane at landfall. So expected to strengthen heading further on into this evening. Rapid intensification as Ida moves over to the Gulf. Very favorable conditions. Low wind shear, extremely warm water. So Ida will unfortunately thrive in these conditions. That's also now why we're expecting that to become that Category 4 hurricane. No major changes to the track there. If anything, landfall moving up just a little bit earlier on Sunday. That's one of the other things that I noticed is 1 p.m. You can see Ida just offshore. Sorry, just reading the comments here. Okay, perfect. Glad to hear that everyone can hear me okay. That tends to be one of the things that we run into is the sound cutting out sometimes. So just keep me updated on that. Glad to see everyone watching here. So yes, Ida. 80 miles per hour, still a Category 1 at this time, expected to strengthen. Category 4 at landfall. The good news for us here locally, staying further off towards our west. No major shifts at this time to that track. However, now this is expected to be a very destructive major hurricane at this time with those sustained winds, 140 miles per hour at landfall, and still continuing to move through Louisiana, as that hurricane. So let's be thinking of the folks in this area. If you know anyone, if you're currently watching from Louisiana, evacuate. Don't stay there, especially if you're along those coastal spots. If you know anyone in that area, here locally, we're still going to be seeing impacts regardless of that, especially with this getting up to that Category 4. We're still going to be seeing an enlarged wind field, tropical storm force winds possible, even for coastal Alabama, coastal Mississippi, borderline hurricane winds possible. Really my biggest concern for, I speak locally, we're Fox 10, we're located in Mobile, Alabama. Biggest concerns that I'm looking at for us here is going to be that rainfall. I'm zooming into the track, shifting it, sorry, it's kind of, let's see if I can fix that. There we go. I really want you to pay attention to that landfall Sunday afternoon. We start to move into central Mississippi. Or even central Louisiana, we get into Monday. And then by the time it gets further into Mississippi, we're at Tuesday. Once the system makes landfall, it's going to be pretty slow moving. So that just means more rain coming into our area. Also, you can start to see a little bit of that curvature. That's bringing more rain towards us. That's going to be lifting off the Gulf. This is equal southeasterly winds too. That's almost 48 hours worth of southeasterly winds bringing in that tide. The river's not really going to be seeing much relief. So flooding and that rainfall amount, that's going to be the biggest concern here locally. So keep that in mind in case you are in low-lying areas. If you live somewhere near rivers and streams, that's what we really need to be keeping the biggest eye out for. Also, something that we need to be keeping an eye out for, those isolated tornadoes. That threat will begin on Sunday and continue into Monday once we start to see some of those outer rain bands. Models. In pretty decent agreement with this track, if I can get it to move there we go. So models in decent agreement of what that track the National Hurricane Center currently has is. I'm also reading your comments during this time too, just that way I can stay updated, don't lose any questions in there. If I do miss a question, I will go back on these comments too, so just feel free. Someone asked if it's okay to TikTok the report. Yeah, go for it. If you can share this, highly recommend doing so. Someone asked, can it still turn right? That cone is still wide, so that's, I'm going to go back to the cone because we're looking at the models. The cone's still decently wide, and so within that range of tracking towards New Orleans is not out of the question. We are keeping a close eye on a ridge of high pressure over the Carolinas that's making it do that curvature. So if it does shift further east, still possible. I don't, that shift east towards us, that center track towards us, pretty much out of the question. But it could shift a little bit further east to where those impacts could be greater here locally. So anyone in New Orleans still needs to be keeping a close eye on the system. That 72-hour range is about 120-mile error from the National Hurricane Center. So we are not within that 120 miles. If it does shift, that just means that our impacts will be greater, but not nearly as significant as if that center was heading over us. I've had a lot of questions about evacuations. I never like to give that information here locally, most likely not needed. Coastal areas, just be on high alert for some of that storm surge that we're seeing. I'm expecting around 3 to 5 feet. Power outages, possible, especially further towards our west. So Mississippi counties have the higher potential for that. If you live in a lot of trees, that one's very possible. I'm always one to err on the side of caution, and so that's always what I try to advise people to do too. But if you are in Louisiana, if you are on that track, especially if you are on that eastern side of the track, this is nothing to mess around with. That Category 4 storm expected at landfall, sustained winds of 140 miles per hour. Someone asked with Jacksonville, I assume you mean Jacksonville, Florida, unless there's another Jacksonville, then yes, that would be perfectly fine. Anywhere, really, that's just, I would not advise New Orleans as an evacuation point. That would just be my personal opinion there. Even if you can travel further west, that one would be better too. We saw with Fred. If you remember Fred, the western side of those storms, so much better. We hardly saw any impacts from Fred, and that was because we were on that western side of the system. However, due to this track still being so wide, I wouldn't advise taking that by exact point, but really just stay updated, be ready to go, have your hurricane plan in place. This is Sunday afternoon. You still have till tomorrow to make those big decisions. And just always feel free to ask us and keep updated.
We gotta go.
We're good? Okay, then there we go. That is Chief Meteorologist Jason Smith. Good news, we are now going to be back on the air. So you can join us on Fox 10 News at 4 p.m. We'll have all the latest news there and all the latest updates. So glad that everyone could join us here on Facebook Live. Again, you can live stream that newscast too. We'll keep you updated along the way. Thanks so much for joining me. And again, you can ask questions